In this age of globalization, it is becoming increasingly important for people in the Caribbean to explain to others exactly what their culture and their lifestyle is all about. Today we have with us an author, a new author, who is about to do just that in her new book, A Thirst for Rain. Join us on Carib Nation in a few moments and we'll tell you all about it. Hello, welcome to Carib Nation. I'm Doris Dean. Today we continue our series of profiles of interesting Caribbean people, and our visitor today is another new author. Her name is Roslyn Carrington from Trinidad and Tobago, and the book is entitled A Thirst for Rain. Roslyn, thank you very much for joining us in Carib Nation. Thank you for having me. Let's start about the beginning and talk a little bit about where you grew up in Trinidad and Tobago. And what was your childhood like?
I had a wonderful childhood. I had the best kind of childhood that I could have hoped for. I grew up in Santa Cruz in a house that was right at the edge of a forest. And my brother, my sister, and I used to run away all day and play in the forest and look for snakes and run down to the river and play with the village kids. It was a wonderful,
true enchanted forest.
It was truly, truly beautiful. And I also grew up in a home where everybody loved books. So I grew up surrounded by books. We had a study that was wall-to-wall shelves full of books. We had so many books that we couldn't fit them on the shelves. We had boxes full of books, drawers full of books, closets full of books. I used to keep books under my mattress, under my bed.
Oh my goodness.
So I was surrounded by books from birth.
You were born to be a writer.
I was born. I think so. I think I was born to be a writer.
Tell us, what is it about books that fascinated you?
It's not even something that I can pin down. It's a passion, an intense, a spiritual love. It's just a love for books and the sound of words and the feel of words and stories. I love stories. I hear stories all the time in my head. I just keep hearing stories. I was a terrible student because I used to fade away in class. I used to be staring.
Dreaming.
Yeah. I was a terrible student.
A daydreamer, not the teacher's favorite, I'm sure. What you mentioned that your brother and sister, you're one of three, I take it.
That's
and
right.
where are you in that?
The middle.
The middle.
Middle child.
Middle child syndrome, I suppose.
The adventurous one.
Yes. Take your own course.
Yes, that's right.
What kind of a relationship did you have with your parents? Most of us in the Caribbean have either dictatorial or paternalistic type parents where you knew your position as a child and there was not that interaction. What sort of relationship did you have with your family?
Well, I was very lucky in that my parents had us all very young. They had us actually while they were in university.
Oh.
So growing up, they were young and they were always out, always partying, always exploring, and they took us with them. So at age 4 or 5, I was going to parties and going on picnics and going exploring. So there was never a line in that, you know, West Indians like to say children should know their place.
It's, of course.
I didn't know my place. So I was never afraid of adults. I was always a little bit uppity, a little bit of an upstart. But it was good because my parents allowed me to be what I wanted to be and explore where I wanted to explore. So it was really good.
Now that is fortunate. Today, that can probably get out of hand. Much more easily.
Yeah, I can't see myself doing the same for a child of mine. I think I would follow her around. But you know, when I was growing up, it was fine. You know, there was no danger or no threat.
Yes.
Unfortunately, things have changed.
Yes.
So I think I came along at a very happy period.
Yes, a safe time.
A safe time, that's
You
right.
mentioned not being able to do that with a child of your own. Do you have any family of your own?
No.
Is that what you would like to?
If I did, I think I'd be a truly neurotic parent.
My. It's amazing that coming from the relaxed sort of background that you would go in the other direction.
Things have changed too much.
Yes, it's really scary.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, you were also quite a bright student, more so at the university level. Tell us about that, and why was the difference?
Well, as a teenager, again, as a daydreamer, I played the fool a lot. I was bright, but I played the fool. I spent a lot of time writing romances in my copybooks. So, you know, people were convinced that I was taking notes, but I was writing romances. I had friends I used to share this romance writing club with. But I suppose coming along to university, I really got interested in literature, and I loved language, so I did literature and language. And it was fun for me. It was a passion for me. It wasn't work. I honestly can't remember doing an all-nighter. I never stayed up. No,
You're a rare breed.
I just love the books, and I love to write about the books. So I did pretty well. I was Student of the Year twice. I won prizes in every year that I was in university in language and literature.
Awards. Yes. How then did university change your goals, or did it at all change the style that you set for yourself and the goals that you set for yourself?
Well, I was a strange student in that I was a science student. And then I entered university in the Faculty of Arts, because by then I had realized that science wasn't what I really wanted to do. I thought that I was supposed to be a doctor, or that I should be a doctor. And I did sciences. So by the time I got to university, I said, you know, I wanted to do what I wanted to do. And the books were what drew me. So there was a big change around the age of 18 where I did this shift, where it really occurred to me, you know, I can actually do this.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, you said that you thought that you were supposed to be a doctor. Many parents in the Caribbean have these set patterns or lifestyles. You either have to be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher. Did you have that kind of pressure, and is that what led you to think that you wanted to be a doctor?
No, it wasn't a parental pressure. I had an inquiring mind. I liked to read, and I liked to read encyclopedia or books about science. So I just decided, you know, it'll probably be respectable if I became a doctor. But there was no desire or no passion. The passion was really always with words.
What were your parents' occupations?
My mother was a teacher, a language teacher. She eventually became a principal. My father was a trained chemist, but he had left that a while ago. He is in insurance now. But there was this dichotomy in the home. You have the science on the male side and the arts on the female side, and there was always a pull and a tug, you know, but which was better.
Right.
So I can imagine I shocked a lot of people when I decided to go towards the arts.
I'm sure that must have been quite a switch, and whatever happened.
But it worked. It worked out fine.
Now, you wrote your first book at age 9?
Yes.
What possessed you?
I was madly in love with fairy tales. I had shelves full of fairy tales, and I just decided I was going to write my own, and I did, and I still have it. I remember at 9, I actually organized a writers club with 4 children from school, and we had little badges that we had to wear to our club meetings, and we had a rule book that we had to sign, and we used to write stories and read to each other during recess.
You were really serious.
Yeah, I was kind of bossy.
So that you always knew that you were going to be a writer?
I always liked to write, but there was one incident in my childhood, a specific incident that told me I was going to be a writer. And it was at the age of 12 at St. George's College, when I had handed in an assignment. And my English teacher, who's Mrs. Agard, walked into class and read it out. She made me stand in front of the class, read the assignment out loud, and turned to me and said, "Roslyn, when you write your first novel, I want to read it."
Wow.
And it had never occurred to me that I could actually get published. And that was the moment that I knew I was going to be published.
Wow.
I'd always loved to write, but she is the only person who ever put that initial faith, you know, you're going to be a published writer.
Yes.
So the minute I sold my first book, she was the first person I wrote her, sent her a thank you card. She has a copy of this, a copy of my other novel. She's really the person that I owe.
That must be very rewarding for a teacher. So I was going to ask you who or what experience most influenced you, but that's the answer right there.
That's it.
Is there any other person that might have influenced you in terms of your general philosophy?
I grew up in a family that was obsessed with books. And I remember, especially on my mother's side, my grandfather used to memorize poetry and read it out to us. And he was very strict about it. He would recite a line and then point at me. And I had to come up with the other line. I had to be able to follow it. And I loved it. It wasn't pressure. It was wonderful. He still does it.
Great challenge.
When I go to visit, he will say a line and I had better come up with the other line. So
that you had on-the-spot training, so to speak.
On-the-spot training.
Really? Great. Now, you traveled outside of the Caribbean.
Yes, quite a bit.
Have you, where have you lived, and how has that affected your view of both the Caribbean and life inside and outside the Caribbean?
Okay, well, I've traveled quite a bit, but after I graduated, I spent a year in France, in which I taught English at the high school level. And we were in a system where the French government used to hire students from all over the world. So I was in an apartment with girls from Germany and Russia and Spain and France and Italy. So we had this kind of little commune, little global commune going on. And we exchanged a lot of ideas about culture. And the only common language was French. So we would all get together and talk about our countries. And it changed my view about countries with opposing cultures pulling against each other. Because if we at age 21 could have been that close and that supportive, it really could have said a lot. So
you think of places, let's go back to the Caribbean, for instance, right there in Trinidad and in Guyana, you have so many races. And we have some underlying conflict, more so in Guyana, I suppose, now than in Trinidad. What then would you say is the one ingredient that young people will need to help them tolerate each other, the different races?
If I had an answer to that, I'll get a Nobel Prize. I think that we need to realize that we have more in common than we have different. There is underlying tension in Trinidad, but still we're West Indian people, and West Indian people mind each other's business. But minding each other's business is part of looking after each other.
Right.
You know, and if you are looking at your neighbor long enough to know that he's in trouble, you'll step forward. Because that's what the West Indian community is all about. And I think we need to remember that. And to some extent we do. Because I think in spite of the racial conflict, I think if you saw somebody in trouble, regardless of whatever race they are or you are, you're going to step forward. That's still alive in the West Indies, and I hope it's something that never dies.
Although some people would dispute that is still as alive as it has been.
I hope it is.
You refer to that somewhat in your book. You talk about living in what we call a tenement house, in what they call here the projects in this area. Tell us a little bit about the setting of the book.
Okay, it's in what we call a barrack yard, which is a long house in a yard that's broken up into segments with a family in each of the segments. There's no privacy. You can hear through the walls. You can see people come and go, and you know who's spending the night with who, you know who's out and who didn't come back. So it's really about the interconnectivity of the lives of these people and how conflict within one family or within one home affects the lives of all the people in the other homes around them. But it also shows, again, that when trouble happens, they step in.
And the thrust of your book, what is it that caused you to write this particular type of story in terms of getting the message out? What is the message you really want to get out, and why the weather? Why have you used the drought?
Okay, well, first of all, I can start with the drought. This drought, for me, is a metaphor for need and for barrenness in your life. And I remember when I was writing A Thirst for Rain, we were going through a pretty tough rainy season, and I remember the hills were on fire, and the smoke was just there. Every day you get up and there was smoke, and we were all just waiting and waiting and waiting for the rain. And for a lot of us, life is like that, you know. You get by each day through the smoke and through the fire, and you feel that one day rain will come. And rain may eventually come. And sometimes when it comes in a deluge.
Yes.
You know, it might change your life so drastically. And this is what happened in the lives of the characters in the book.
Yes.
Rain did come, but sometimes, for some of them, it was too much rain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wasn't so beneficial. So your message is to remind people that, complete the statement.
Okay, when I started, it was about what I had referred to before, about the connectivity of lives and about support and interconnection. But by the time I was done, I realized it was about parenthood. And I feel very strongly about good parenting because I had a really good home. And I can look at people who have not had that, that benefit and see how it affects their lives. I think, if I remember clearly, when I was in university, I was the only person in my group of friends who had a father living in the home. So the problem is there, the problem is rampant, and I firmly believe that the absence of even one parent could take something away from a child that child will never get back.
That's interesting because just recently I've listened to 2 programs, one by women who have said that they have had absolutely no trouble raising their children on their own, and as far as they're concerned, the children lack for nothing. On the other hand, we have a group who might be suggesting that because women are now self-sufficient and are proving that they can raise children on their own, men may not necessarily be relevant anymore. How do you respond to that?
I would hate to think that men are no longer relevant. I believe that a family depends on both a mother and a father. I'm not speaking out against women who've raised their children on their own because they have done a magnificent job. And it is probably the most prevalent type of family unit that you have in the West Indies. But still, to belittle the contribution that a man can make is so devastating. I see no reason why we should shut men out of our lives.
Of course, there is the woman who makes the choice versus the one for whom the choice has been made.
Yeah.
And there are different views there again in terms of what the message that that mother passes on to the child. Because the one who's made the choice often passes on a different message from the one for whom the choice has been made.
That's right.
And they don't realize how that affects the child in the long run. And I suppose this is a debate that will continue
go on forever
and ever. Let's look a little bit at how you portray women in your book and the struggles and lives of women. How would you say the life of a Caribbean woman is different from that of women in North America, Europe?
I personally don't believe there's that much of a difference. I think that the differences would be cultural. It would be more about architecture and clothing and climate or whatever. But I think that women throughout the world have the same underlying needs and the same underlying responsibilities. It will change from culture to culture, but I believe in a kind of unity of woman. I know that sounds utopian, but I honestly do believe it. We love, we have babies, we have parents, we have lovers, we are hurt by men, we hurt men. We all essentially alike.
So that there is some, mind you, we have been accused of bonding more readily than men anyway,
Yes, that's
so that
probably
there's
true.
a chance
That's
that it's easier to come together.
Yes.
What would you say is the characteristic then of the Caribbean writer in terms of what the message is? There seems to be a common message from Caribbean people, and that is that there is another life besides the one that the tourist sees, and it's totally different. What is the characteristic that they use, that they have to get that message across, and are they really getting that message out?
Well, I think that as writers, we have a responsibility to show reality I mean, there are times when, yes, we do want fantasy, okay? But as far as what the tourists would want to see, that's a job for the ad copywriters. That's a different thing. But if we are portraying the lives of people as we know it, and we are portraying the truth as we know it, then we have a responsibility to step away from pandering to the images of what people would expect and write what we see and what we believe. I think that's where we as writers have to go.
Now, when you're not writing novels, you are a writer in your everyday job, public relations.
Public relations, that's right.
What does your job entail, and how do you bring to bear that aspect of you and what you write? I'm sure you are open to all sorts of things. I'm sure you have opinions on politics, art, culture. What is the focus of your column, and what are some of the things that you write about? What's your philosophy about, like?
Okay. Well, actually, I have two other writing personas. I write in my day job, which is public relations, which I do for a gas company. And that's a lot about information for the public. I speak to children a lot, do a lot of tours, exhibitions. So that involves a lot of writing and knowledge of the business. And then I have a column with the Trinidad Guardian, which is on my personal time. And I have totally free reign. I can write about anything that I want. The only things I don't write about party politics. I write a lot about sexual politics, and that has gotten me into a lot of trouble.
I can imagine.
A lot of people have called me a male basher, you know, but that's definitely not true. I love men. I have all respect for men, but I have a serious problem with domestic violence, and I have a serious problem with infidelity, especially when it causes broken homes or transmission of disease. So I write about that.
I see.
Okay? And I'm equally hard on the women who condone it or who participate as I am on the men. But for some reason, people just think that she's going to hit the men again. And that's not true.
Well, of course, in the Caribbean, that is a universal problem and something that it's almost understood that the men will get the bashing more so than women, because women have been subjected for so long.
That's true.
To so much.
That's true.
But let's talk a little bit also about your main character, Myra, in the book. She had a number of aspirations for her child based on what she found that she was lacking herself.
That's right.
Talk a little bit about that and how those aspirations are changed today, or have they?
Well, Myra grew up, as she herself confessed, in the back alleys of San Fernando. She wasn't a good student. She was more interested in men. She said she got her education in the darkened store corners, you know, with boys. And therefore she found herself pregnant at the age of 16 or 17. And that has impacted on her life. She was thrown out of home by her father and had to fend for herself, essentially. But now that her daughter is all grown up, daughter is 17 years old, preparing to do her A-levels and looking forward to university, Myra has pinned all her hopes on her daughter, because essentially Odile is who she could have been if what happened to her hadn't happened to her.
Right.
Okay? So she has been pushing and she has been making every sacrifice possible to make sure that this child gets to university and has a good life. And I think all mothers want that.
Right.
But her desire has been so great that it has blinded her to the fact that her daughter was not as pure as she thought, was troubled and seeking help and needing attention, and she never noticed. Her daughter was actually 5 months pregnant before it even occurred to her that the child had been pregnant.
Right. That says a lot for what is still happening in the Caribbean today. What do you think then is the one thing that has changed in the woman of today?
I think we have a lot more chances, more opportunities, more information, more networking. Although women of the past had their own networks. It might have been around a wash tub, but the network was there. But now we have information about our bodies, we have better education. We are actually dominating education. If you look at the campus, there must be about 60 or 70% females on the campus.
But at all levels.
You know? Yes.
At all levels, even in elementary level.
So we have much wider scope to move forward. So.
And do you think that we are then using that and to give us a better sense of self and using it wisely?
Some of us are. I think some of us aren't.
Yeah.
I think there's still too many children getting pregnant. The HIV rates among teenage girls is astounding. So the information is there, but somehow it's not getting from one generation to the next.
Right, yeah. Now, there are some people who would agree that our generation has dropped the ball.
I think.
And we have not really kept on tap in terms of getting the message across that it is now for the next generation to take the baton to the next level. And we've sort of become complacent. What do you see for the Caribbean in the year 2000 and on?
Well, I think to answer the first part of your question first, I do think that the older generations need to get in and do something. Now, I know that the younger generation probably doesn't even want to hear it, you know, but something needs to be done. And a lot of them, although they're not admitting that they need help or that they need information, would accept it. They will grumble and pretend that they don't want it, but they would still accept it. And as what I see in the future, it could go either way. I think we are standing at a crossroad, and I think somebody has to take responsibility before the generation either goes this way or that way. And the responsibility has to lie with the adults who have had the experiences, who have the information, who have the education. We can't just expect the younger generation to just
pick it up by osmosis.
Gallop off.
Yeah. Well, what's next for you?
I'm working on another novel, follow-up to A Thirst for Rain. I also have my romance line, which I write under the name Simona Taylor with BET Arabesque.
Oh, you're a busy lady.
Yes. And I have a collection of short stories called Sex and Obia, 15 short stories. And I'm looking for a home for that. And I've had quite a few publishers interested, so.
Well, all the best. Good luck to you.
So
you must
much.
have a very busy and interesting future. All the best. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope to see you again in the next novel.
I hope so. I look forward to it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
You have been listening to a little chat we've had with Roslyn Carrington, a new author from Trinidad and Tobago. And the title of the book we've been talking about is A Thirst for Rain. Thanks for joining us in Carib Nation. Thank you for all the comments you've given us. And we hope to hear more from you. Until next time, I'm Doris Dean.